The sound of her sobbing carried across the frozen creek bed like a wounded animal's cry. And Ethan Hawthorne reined in his horse so fast the gelding nearly sat back on its haunches. January in Nevada Territory was brutal enough without finding a woman half frozen in the middle of nowhere. But there she was, hunched over in the shallow water, her dark hair plastered to her face, her entire body shaking so violently he could see it from 20 yards away. He dismounted before his brain fully caught up with his body, his boots crunching through the ice-crusted snow as he ran toward her, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way that had nothing to do with the exertion. "Madam," he called out, his voice rougher than he intended. "Madam, can you hear me?" She lifted her head, and even through the tears and the grime and the obvious exhaustion, Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were the color of spring grass, bright and alive despite everything, and they locked onto his face with an intensity that made him stumble slightly as he reached the creek's edge. "Please," she whispered, her lips blue with cold. "Please, I cannot feel my legs anymore." Ethan did not hesitate. He waded into the creek, the icy water soaking through his leather boots and wool pants, and bent down to scoop her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, or maybe the adrenaline made her seem that way. Her clothes were soaked through, the thin fabric of her dress doing absolutely nothing to protect her from the elements. "I have got you," he said, adjusting his grip so her head rested against his shoulder. "I will carry you home where it is warm. Just hold on to me." "I cannot stop shaking," she managed through chattering teeth. "That is actually a good sign," Ethan told her, though his mind was racing through everything he knew about cold exposure. "It means your body is still fighting. What is your name?" "Penelope," she breathed out. "Penelope Zimmerman." "Well, Miss Zimmerman, I am Ethan Hawthorne, and I promise you I am not going to let anything happen to you." He carried her to his horse, and the animal, bless his well-trained heart, stood perfectly still as Ethan figured out how to mount while holding a barely conscious woman. It took some maneuvering, but he managed to get into the saddle with Penelope cradled against his chest, and then he was urging the horse into a careful trot back toward Gold Hill. The ride took 30 minutes that felt like 30 hours. Penelope drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling things he could not quite make out. And Ethan kept talking to her, kept telling her stories about nothing just to keep her engaged. He told her about his ranch, about the 3 horses he was training, about the time his best horse threw him into a water trough in front of half the town. Anything to keep her awake. Gold Hill came into view just as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of orange and pink. The town was small, maybe 200 people on a good day, nestled in the hills about a mile south of Virginia City. Ethan's ranch sat on the outskirts, a modest spread with a sturdy house built from local timber and stone. He rode straight to his front door, dismounting with Penelope still in his arms. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, must have seen them coming because the door swung open before he reached it. "Good Lord," Mrs. Chen gasped, her weathered face creasing with concern. "What happened?" "Found her in Cleary Creek," Ethan said, carrying Penelope inside. The warmth of the house hit him like a physical force, and he heard Penelope whimper against his chest. "She needs dry clothes and warming, but not too fast." Mrs. Chen, who had raised 7 children and knew more about practical medicine than most doctors Ethan had met, immediately took charge. "Bring her to the guest room. I will get blankets and warm water. How long was she in that creek?" "I do not know. Long enough." Ethan carried Penelope down the short hallway to the guest bedroom, a simple room with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the western hills. He laid her gently on the bed, and her eyes fluttered open. "Where?" she started to ask. "You are safe," Ethan said, brushing a strand of wet hair from her forehead without thinking about it. "This is my home. Mrs. Chen is going to help you get warm and dry. Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up in that creek?" Penelope's face crumpled, fresh tears mixing with the half-frozen ones already on her cheeks. "The stagecoach. There was an accident, we hit ice and the whole thing went over. I was thrown clear, but I landed in the creek. The driver, the other passengers." Her voice broke. "I tried to help them, but I could not. I could not move the wreckage, and then I just started walking because I thought I would freeze if I stayed still. But then I could not walk anymore, and I just sat down because everything hurt so much." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. A stagecoach accident meant other people might still be out there. "Where? How far from where I found you? Maybe half a mile upstream. I am not sure. I was not thinking clearly." Mrs. Chen bustled in with an armful of quilts and a basin of lukewarm water. "Out," she ordered Ethan. "This girl needs privacy and dry clothes. You go check on this accident, see if there is anyone else who needs help." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to stay and make sure Penelope was truly all right, but Mrs. Chen was right. If there were other survivors, they were running out of time. "I will be back as soon as I can," he said, looking at Penelope. "You rest." "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my life." The words followed Ethan as he left the house and mounted his horse again. The sun was sinking faster now, and he pushed his gelding into a gallop back toward the creek. "Half a mile upstream," she had said. He found the wreckage just as the last light was fading from the sky. The stagecoach had indeed gone over, probably caught a wheel on black ice and tumbled down the embankment. It lay on its side, half submerged in the creek, the horses nowhere to be seen. Ethan approached carefully, calling out, but there was no answer. He found the driver pinned beneath the coach, clearly dead from the impact. 2 passengers were inside, an older couple, also dead. His heart sank as he checked each one, confirming what Penelope had feared. There was nothing he could do for them now except ride to town and report the accident. The sheriff would need to know, and these people deserved a proper burial. Ethan marked the location carefully in his mind and headed back toward Gold Hill, stopping at the sheriff's office to explain what he had found. Sheriff Daniels, a grizzled man who had seen more than his share of tragedy in these mountains, took down the information with practiced efficiency. "I will get a crew out there first light," he said. "You say you found a survivor, Miss Penelope Zimmerman. She is at my place now with Mrs. Chen looking after her." The sheriff raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Ethan was known in Gold Hill as a decent man, a hard worker who kept to himself mostly, and Mrs. Chen's presence would keep any gossip to a minimum. Still, having a young woman staying at his ranch was going to raise some eyebrows. By the time Ethan made it back home, full dark had settled over the land. He took care of his horse first, rubbing the animal down and making sure he had food and water, then trudged back to the house. The windows glowed with warm lamplight and wood smoke curled from the chimney. It looked like a home, he thought, more than it had in a long time. Mrs. Chen met him at the door. "She is sleeping," she said quietly. "Poor thing was completely exhausted. I got her warmed up slowly, checked her over. Some bruising, but nothing broken as far as I can tell. Her feet and hands were the worst, but I think she will be all right. No frostbite, thank the Lord. You found her just in time." Ethan felt the tension drain from his shoulders. The others were not so lucky, all 3 dead. Mrs. Chen crossed herself. That poor girl, to survive that and lose everyone else. She looked at Ethan with knowing eyes. She will need time to recover, and not just physically. Trauma like that leaves marks you cannot see. "She can stay here as long as she needs," Ethan said, surprising himself with how quickly the words came. "We have the room." That we do, Mrs. Chen agreed. Now you get yourself warmed up and fed. I made stew and there is fresh bread. You have done a good thing today, Ethan. Ethan was not sure about that, but he was too tired to argue. He ate the stew without really tasting it, then sat by the fire for a long time, staring into the flames and thinking about green eyes and a voice that said please like a prayer. When he finally went to bed, sleep was a long time coming. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Penelope in that creek, shaking and crying, and felt again that strange lurch in his chest when she had looked up at him. He had pulled people out of bad situations before. This was Nevada territory in 1875, and trouble was never far away. But this felt different somehow. This felt like the beginning of something he could not quite name. Morning came cold and bright. Ethan was up before dawn, as always, tending to his animals and checking the property. When he came back inside, Mrs. Chen was cooking breakfast and the smell of bacon and eggs filled the house. "She is awake," Mrs. Chen said. "Still weak, but she asked for you." Ethan felt his heart skip. "She did. Do not look so surprised. You saved her life. She wants to thank you properly." Mrs. Chen gave him a look. "And she is asking about the others. I told her you would explain." Ethan found Penelope sitting up in bed, wrapped in one of Mrs. Chen's quilts. Someone had brushed her hair and it fell in dark waves over her shoulders. In the daylight, he could see that she was probably close to his own age, maybe 23 or 24. Her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes, but those green eyes were just as striking as he remembered. "Good morning," he said from the doorway, suddenly unsure of himself. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was thrown from a stagecoach and spent time in a frozen creek," Penelope said, and there was a hint of humor in her voice that made him smile. "But alive, thanks to you. Mrs. Chen said you went back to look for the others." Ethan stepped into the room, leaning against the wall because sitting on the bed seemed too intimate. "I did. I am sorry, Miss Zimmerman, they did not make it." Penelope closed her eyes, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew when I could not get them out, but I hoped maybe." She trailed off, opening her eyes again. They were bright with unshed tears. The driver was named Morton. He had been driving that route for 15 years, he told me, never had an accident. And the couple, the Hendersons, they were going to Virginia City to see their new grandchild. Mrs. Henderson showed me a blanket she had knitted. "I am sorry," Ethan said again, wishing he had better words. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You saved me. If you had not come along when you did." She shuddered. "I was giving up. I was so cold and so tired, and I just wanted to close my eyes and sleep. But you did not. No, I kept thinking that I had come so far, and it could not end in a frozen creek in the middle of nowhere." Penelope looked at him directly. "Where was I going, you might ask? I was on my way to Virginia City. I have a position there, or I am supposed to, as a school teacher." "Virginia City is not far from here," Ethan said. "Maybe 5 miles. Once you are recovered, I can take you there." Something flickered across Penelope's face, an emotion he could not quite read. "I suppose I should send word that I will be delayed. They are expecting me in 2 days, or they were. What is today? January 15th. Then I am already late." Penelope bit her lip. "I do not want to impose on your hospitality more than necessary, Mr. Hawthorne. You have already done so much." "You are not imposing," Ethan said firmly. "You nearly died yesterday. You need time to recover, and you are welcome here for as long as that takes. Mrs. Chen enjoys having someone to fuss over, and I have plenty of space. Besides, the weather is supposed to turn bad again in the next few days. You do not want to be traveling in that." Penelope studied him for a long moment, and Ethan felt like she was seeing more than he intended to show. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me at all. Does a man need a reason to help someone in trouble? In my experience, yes, Penelope said quietly. Everyone wants something. There was a story there, Ethan could tell, pain in her voice that had nothing to do with the accident. Not everyone, he said. And I do not want anything from you except to see you recover. Consider it Western hospitality. Is that what they call it out here? Penelope asked, and this time there was definitely humor in her voice. Where I come from, we would call it a miracle. Where do you come from? Philadelphia. Born and raised. Penelope pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. I have never been west of Pennsylvania until 3 weeks ago. This is all very new to me. What brought you all the way out here? Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Most people came west for gold or land or to escape something. A school teacher from Philadelphia was unusual. Penelope's expression shuddered slightly. A fresh start, she said. Sometimes you need to go far away to become someone new. Ethan understood that sentiment better than she probably realized. He had come to Nevada 6 years ago for similar reasons, leaving behind a life in Missouri that had stopped fitting. Well, you certainly chose a dramatic way to begin your new life. That surprised a laugh out of her, quickly cut off by a wince. Everything hurts, she admitted. Mrs. Chen said that is normal, but I feel like I was trampled by horses. Close enough, Ethan agreed. You should rest. I will have Mrs. Chen bring you breakfast, and we can talk more later when you are feeling stronger. He turned to leave, but Penelope's voice stopped him. Mr. Hawthorne, thank you. Truly, I know I keep saying it, but I do not know how else to express what you did for me yesterday. You saved my life, and I will never forget that. Ethan looked back at her, at this woman who had crashed into his life quite literally, and felt that strange pull again. You are welcome, Miss Zimmerman. Now rest. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Ethan went about his usual work, training horses and maintaining the ranch, while Penelope recovered under Mrs. Chen's watchful care. On the second day, she was strong enough to leave the bedroom, and Ethan came home to find her sitting in his favorite chair by the fire, reading a book from his small collection. I hope you do not mind, she said, looking up as he entered. Mrs. Chen said you would not. Of course not. Ethan hung his hat and coat by the door, very aware of how domestic the scene felt. How are you feeling? Much better. Still sore, but I can walk without feeling like I might collapse. Penelope held up the book, a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets. You have good taste in reading material. I would not have expected a rancher to have poetry. Even cowboys can appreciate a well-turned phrase, Ethan said, feeling oddly defensive. I did not mean it as an insult, Penelope said quickly. I am just surprised. Most of the men I have known would rather be caught dead than reading poetry. Most of the men you have known sound boring. Penelope laughed, a real laugh this time, and the sound filled the room with warmth. They were actually very boring and very concerned with appearances and what everyone thought. Not much room for that out here, Ethan said, settling into the chair across from her. You are judged by what you do, not who your family is or how much money you have. I think I am going to like it here, Penelope said softly. If I can survive stagecoach accidents and frozen creeks, I can probably survive anything. Over dinner that night, prepared by Mrs. Chen and eaten at the small table in the kitchen, Penelope told them more about her plans. The teaching position in Virginia City was at a school that served the children of miners and merchants, anyone who could spare their children for a few hours of education each day. The pay was modest, but it included a small room above the schoolhouse. It is not much, Penelope said, pushing potatoes around her plate, but it is mine, or it will be, assuming they have not given the position to someone else after I failed to arrive. I will ride over tomorrow and explain what happened, Ethan offered. "They will understand." "Would you?" Penelope looked at him with such gratitude that Ethan felt his chest tighten. "I would go myself, but I am not sure I am ready for that yet." "Of course. What is the name of the person I should speak with?" "Mr. Samuel Grayson. He is the head of the school board." The next day, Ethan rode to Virginia City, a bustling mining town that was everything Gold Hill was not. The streets were crowded with people, the air filled with the sound of stamping mills processing ore from the Comstock lode. He found Mr. Grayson at the schoolhouse, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually worried expression. "Mr. Hawthorne," Grayson said after Ethan explained the situation. "I had heard about the stagecoach accident. Terrible business. But you say Miss Zimmerman survived." "She did." "She is recovering at my ranch." Grayson's eyebrows rose slightly, but he had the good grace not to comment. "I am relieved to hear it. We were quite concerned when she did not arrive. Her letters came so highly recommended. Please tell her that the position is still hers, and she should take all the time she needs to recover. The children have been managing with my wife filling in, but we are eager to have a proper teacher." Ethan returned home with the good news, finding Penelope in the front room again, this time attempting to help Mrs. Chen with mending. She looked up eagerly as he entered. "Well," she asked, "the position is still yours. Mr. Grayson said to take your time recovering." The relief on Penelope's face was palpable. "Oh, thank goodness, I was so worried." She set down the shirt she had been mending. "I should probably go there soon then. I have already imposed on your hospitality for too long." "You have been here 3 days," Ethan pointed out. "Hardly too long." "And I thought you said everything still hurt." "It does," Penelope admitted, "but I cannot stay here forever." "Why not stay until you are fully recovered?" Mrs. Chen interjected. "Another week, at least. The weather has been terrible and you are in no condition to start working yet." Penelope looked between them, clearly torn. "I do not want to take advantage." "You are not," Ethan said and meant it. The truth was he liked having her here. The house felt more alive with her in it, fuller somehow. "Please stay, at least until you are stronger." "All right," Penelope said finally. "1 more week, but then I really must go and start my new life." That week passed far too quickly for Ethan's liking. Each day, Penelope grew stronger and more comfortable in his home. They fell into conversations easily, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about Philadelphia, about the strict household where she had grown up, about the scandal that had driven her west. "I was engaged," she said one evening as they sat by the fire. Mrs. Chen had retired for the night, and the house was quiet except for the crackling of the flames. "To a man my parents approved of. Richard Aldrich, from a good family with money and connections. Everything they thought I should want." "But you did not want it," Ethan guessed. "I did not want him," Penelope corrected. "He was controlling and cold, and he made it very clear that once we were married, my life would be entirely his to dictate. What I wore, who I spoke to, what I did with my time. I would have been a decoration, nothing more. So you ran." "Not at first. I tried to break the engagement properly, but Richard refused. He said we had an understanding, that he had invested time and resources in courting me, and I owed him. When I insisted, he spread rumors about me, said I had been improper with other men, that I was mentally unstable. My parents believed him, or at least they chose his version over mine." Penelope's voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the pain underneath. "So yes, eventually I ran. I found the advertisement for the teaching position, applied under just my first name and initial, and when they accepted me, I took all the money I had saved and bought a ticket west." "That took courage," Ethan said quietly, "or desperation." Penelope looked at him, the firelight playing across her features. "But I do not regret it." Even with the accident, even with everything that happened, I do not regret it. Out here, I can be whoever I want to be. I am not trapped by expectations or by what people think I should do." "You are right about that," Ethan agreed. "The West does not care about your past, only about who you are now." "Who are you now, Ethan Hawthorne?" Penelope asked. "You know my story. What is yours?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, debating how much to share. But she had been honest with him, and he found he wanted to return that honesty. "I was supposed to take over my father's farm in Missouri, 300 acres that had been in our family for generations. It was assumed, the oldest son inherits, carries on the family name and tradition. But you did not want that either." "I wanted to want it," Ethan said. "I tried to want it. But every day I spent on that farm felt like a day wasted. I wanted to see more, do more, be more than just the next generation doing exactly what the previous generation did. My father did not understand. We fought about it for 2 years before I finally left. Packed up, sold my share of the farm to my brother and headed west. That was 1869. I have been here ever since." "You regret it?" "No. My father died 3 years ago without ever forgiving me, and that hurts. But I built something here that is mine. This ranch, small as it is, belongs to me in a way that farm never did. I work for myself, answer to myself, live by my own rules." Ethan looked at Penelope. "I think you will understand that feeling once you start teaching, building something that is yours." "I hope so," Penelope said softly. "I hope I can be as brave as you are. You already are. You survived that accident. You are here alive, about to start a new life in a place you have never been. That is brave." Penelope held his gaze, and something passed between them, something electric and warm that made Ethan's breath catch. He wanted to move closer, wanted to touch her hand, but he held himself back. She had been through enough without him complicating things. "I should probably turn in," Penelope said, her voice a little breathless. "Tomorrow is my last full day here, and I want to help Mrs. Chen as much as I can before I leave. Good night, Penelope." "Good night, Ethan." He watched her go, and the room felt emptier without her in it. The next day passed in a blur of activity. Penelope insisted on helping with everything, from cooking to cleaning to mending, despite Mrs. Chen's protests that she was still recovering. Ethan spent most of the day working with a particularly stubborn horse, but his mind kept wandering back to the house and the woman in it. That evening, over dinner, Mrs. Chen announced she would be spending the night at her daughter's house in town. "She is expecting a baby any day now," Mrs. Chen explained. "I want to be there when the time comes. I will be back in a few days," which left Ethan and Penelope alone in the house for the first time. The realization hung between them as they cleaned up after dinner, an unspoken awareness that made every casual touch feel significant. "Would you like to sit by the fire for a while?" Ethan asked when the dishes were done. "Unless you are tired." "I am not tired," Penelope said. "And yes, I would like that." They settled into their usual chairs, but the atmosphere felt different tonight, more charged, more intimate. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows and howling around the corners of the house. "Sounds like that storm is finally moving in," Ethan observed. "It sounds fierce." Penelope pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I am glad I am not out in that." "Me too," Ethan said, with more feeling than he intended. Penelope looked at him curiously. "You care about what happens to me." It was not a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "Yes, I do." "Why, you barely know me." "I know enough." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I know you are brave and smart and funny. I know you read poetry and you are not afraid to start over. I know that when you laugh, it lights up the whole room. I know that I have never met anyone quite like you, Penelope Zimmerman." Penelope's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly. "Ethan." I am not trying to make you uncomfortable, Ethan said quickly. I just wanted you to know. Tomorrow you are going to Virginia City to start your new life, and I am happy for you. But I am also going to miss you, and I wanted to say that while I still had the chance. What if I said I am going to miss you too? Penelope asked softly. What if I said that this week has been one of the best of my life, despite everything? What if I said I do not really want to leave? Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Then I would say you do not have to, not yet, not until you are ready, but the teaching position will still be there in another week or two, or however long you need. Ethan stood and crossed to her chair, kneeling down beside it so they were at eye level. I am not trying to keep you here against your will, but if you want to stay, if you want to see where this thing between us might go, then I am asking you to give it a chance. Give us a chance. Penelope reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. This is crazy. I have only known you for a week. The best things usually are crazy, Ethan said. What does your heart tell you? My heart tells me that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. That when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. That the thought of leaving tomorrow and maybe never seeing you again makes me want to cry. Penelope's eyes were bright with emotion. But I am scared, Ethan. I ran away from one man who wanted to control my life. What if I am making the same mistake again? I do not want to control your life, Ethan said fiercely. I want to share it if you will let me. You want to teach. Teach. You want your independence. Keep it. I am not asking you to give up anything. I am just asking you to stay long enough to see if what I feel, what we both feel, is real. What do you feel? Penelope whispered. Like I have been waiting my whole life for you to show up in that creek. Like finding you was not an accident but fate. Like I am falling in love with you, Penelope, and it terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. Penelope made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You are falling in love with me. Yes. Is that all right? It is more than all right, Penelope said, because I think I am falling in love with you too. Ethan felt like his heart might burst. He stood, pulling Penelope up with him, and then his hands were cradling her face and hers were clutching his shirt, and they were kissing like two people who had been waiting their whole lives for this moment. Her lips were soft and warm, and she tasted like the coffee they had drunk with dinner and something sweeter, something uniquely her. The kiss deepened, became urgent, and Ethan pulled her closer, feeling her body press against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Penelope rested her forehead against his chest. What now? She asked. Now you stay, Ethan said, stroking her hair. We take this slow, figure things out together. You go to Virginia City and teach if that is what you want. I will come visit you, or you can come here on weekends. We will court properly, do things right. Properly, Penelope repeated, looking up at him with mischief in her eyes. Because that kiss was so proper. Ethan laughed. All right, maybe not entirely proper, but you know what I mean. I want to do this right with you. I want to give you time to be sure. I am already sure, Penelope said. But I understand what you are saying. And yes, I want to teach. That position is important to me, but I also want this. I want you. Can I have both? You can have anything you want, Ethan promised. They stayed up late into the night, talking and kissing and making plans. Penelope would start teaching in Virginia City, but she would come to the ranch on Saturdays, and Ethan would visit her in town whenever he could spare the time. They would see each other as much as possible, let whatever was building between them grow naturally. When Penelope finally went to bed, Ethan lay awake in his own room, staring at the ceiling and marveling at how much his life had changed in a single week. He had been content with his solitary existence, focused on building his ranch and nothing more. But now he could not imagine going back to that loneliness, not when he knew what it felt like to have Penelope in his life. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having passed in the night. Ethan drove Penelope to Virginia City in his wagon, her small trunk of belongings secured in the back. The ride took less than an hour, but they stretched it out, taking their time, neither of them eager to say goodbye even temporarily. The schoolhouse was a simple building on the edge of town, with a small apartment accessible by an outside staircase. Mr. Grayson met them there, clearly relieved to see Penelope in person. "Miss Zimmerman, welcome. We are so glad you are recovered enough to join us." He glanced at Ethan with curiosity. "Mr. Hawthorne, thank you for bringing her safely." "It was my pleasure," Ethan said, and meant it. Grayson showed Penelope the schoolhouse and the apartment, explaining the schedule and expectations. Ethan carried her trunk upstairs, setting it in the corner of the small but clean room. There was a bed, a dresser, a table with 2 chairs, and a small stove for heat and cooking. Not much, but it was hers. When Grayson finally left them alone, Ethan pulled Penelope into his arms. "You will be all right here. I will be fine," Penelope assured him. "It is perfect, actually. My own space, my own work. Everything I wanted." "I will miss you," Ethan said. "It is 5 miles, not 500. You will see me on Saturday." "That is 4 days away." "You can survive 4 days," Penelope teased, though her eyes were serious. "And so can I." Ethan kissed her once more, trying to pour everything he felt into it. "If you need anything, send word. I will come immediately." "I know you will. That is one of the things I love about you. Love." She had said love. Ethan felt like he was floating as he climbed back into his wagon and headed home. The ranch felt empty without her, but the emptiness was different now, filled with anticipation rather than loneliness. Saturday could not come fast enough. Penelope's first few days of teaching were challenging but rewarding. The children ranged in age from 6 to 14, all crammed into one room, and their education levels varied wildly. Some could barely read, others were surprisingly advanced. She threw herself into the work, creating lesson plans and getting to know each child individually. At night, in her small apartment, she thought about Ethan. About the way he had looked at her, the way he had held her, about the promise of Saturday and what it might bring. When Saturday finally arrived, Penelope was waiting on the steps of the schoolhouse before the sun was fully up. She saw Ethan's wagon coming down the road and felt her heart leap. He pulled up and jumped down, and then she was running to him, and he was catching her, spinning her around like she weighed nothing. "I missed you," she said against his neck. "I missed you too, so much." Ethan set her down but kept his arms around her. "How was your first week?" "Exhausting and wonderful. Tell me about it on the way. I want to hear about the ranch and the horses and everything." They spent the day at the ranch, falling into an easy rhythm. Penelope helped with small tasks, learning about Ethan's work, while he listened to her stories about the children and the town. Mrs. Chen was back, and she smiled knowingly at the way they gravitated toward each other, always finding excuses to touch. That evening after dinner, Ethan took Penelope outside to see the stars. The sky was impossibly clear, the stars so bright and numerous they looked like scattered diamonds. "I never saw stars like this in Philadelphia," Penelope breathed. "One of the benefits of living in the middle of nowhere," Ethan said. He had his arm around her shoulders and she was tucked against his side, perfectly warm despite the cold. "It is not nowhere. It is here. It is home." Penelope tilted her head to look up at him. "Or it could be someday." "Is that what you want, to stay here?" "I want to be wherever you are," Penelope said simply. "The details we can figure out." They kissed under the stars, and it felt like sealing a promise. The weeks turned into months, and their relationship deepened. Penelope taught during the week, becoming beloved by her students and respected by the community. On weekends, she came to the ranch, and slowly it became her home too. She learned to ride despite an initial fear of horses. She helped with chores and learned to cook Mrs. Chen's recipes. She filled the house with laughter and life. Ethan, for his part, found himself traveling to Virginia City more often than he probably should, just to steal a few minutes with Penelope. He attended school performances and helped her grade papers. He met her students and their families, becoming a familiar face in town. By spring, it was clear to everyone that they were going to get married. The only question was when. Ethan asked her properly in April, during one of her weekend visits. He had been working up the courage for weeks, even though he knew she would say yes. They were down by the creek, the same creek where he had found her, though the water was running freely now, no longer frozen. "This is where it started," Ethan said, holding her hand. "Where I found you and everything changed." "I think about that day sometimes," Penelope said. "How close I came to dying. How lucky I am that you came along when you did." "I am the lucky one," Ethan said. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple gold band he had bought in Virginia City. "Penelope Zimmerman, you are the bravest, smartest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You changed my life the moment I pulled you out of this creek, and I do not want to spend another day without you. Will you marry me?" Penelope's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you." Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that made the world fall away. When they broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. "When?" Penelope asked. "When should we get married?" "Whenever you want." "Tomorrow, next month, next year. I will wait as long as you need." "I do not want to wait," Penelope said. "I have already waited my whole life to feel like this. Let us get married soon. This summer." They were married in June on a bright Saturday afternoon at the small church in Gold Hill. Penelope wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Ethan wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. The church was packed with friends and neighbors, people who had watched their courtship with approval and affection. Sheriff Daniels was there, along with Mr. Grayson and several of Penelope's students and their families. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife and Ethan kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and enough food to feed half the county. There was music and dancing, and Ethan waltzed with his wife under the stars, the same stars they had kissed under months before. "Happy?" he asked, holding her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Penelope said. "Thank you for finding me in that creek. Thank you for carrying me home." "This will always be your home," Ethan promised, "wherever we are as long as we are together." Penelope continued teaching through the following school year, commuting from the ranch each day. It was not easy, especially in winter, but she loved her work and refused to give it up just because she was married. Ethan supported her completely, often driving her to town himself and picking her up in the afternoon. By the spring of 1877, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little fear. They were going to be parents, which was wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. "What if I am not good at it?" Penelope worried one night, lying in bed with Ethan's hand on her still flat stomach. "You are good at everything," Ethan said. "You will be an amazing mother." "What if the baby does not like me?" "Impossible. Everyone likes you," Penelope laughed, swatting at him. "I am serious. So am I." Ethan propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "Penelope, you are kind and patient and loving. Our child is going to be so lucky to have you as a mother, and I am going to be right there with you, figuring it all out together." "Together," Penelope repeated, reaching up to touch his face. "I like the sound of that." Their son was born in November, a healthy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Ethan's grandfather, and the moment Ethan held his son for the first time, he understood a whole new kind of love. Penelope took a break from teaching to care for Thomas, though she continued working with her students through correspondence, sending them assignments and feedback. The school board assured her that her position would be waiting whenever she was ready to return. Life on the ranch took on a new rhythm. The sounds of a baby filled the house, along with sleepless nights and endless wonder at this small person they had created. Thomas was a good baby, curious and alert, and both Ethan and Penelope were utterly besotted with him. Mrs. Chen, who had officially retired but still came around several times a week, declared Thomas the most beautiful baby she had ever seen, and proceeded to spoil him thoroughly. When Thomas was 6 months old, Penelope tentatively broached the subject of returning to teaching. "Not full-time," she explained to Ethan, "but maybe a few days a week. Mrs. Chen said she would watch Thomas and I miss it. I miss the children and the work." "Then you should do it," Ethan said immediately. "I told you when we got married that I did not expect you to give up your dreams. If teaching is still your dream, then teach. You really do not mind." "Why would I mind? You are an incredible teacher and those children need you. Besides, Thomas needs to see that his mother is more than just his mother. She is a person with her own interests and talents." Penelope kissed him. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour," Ethan teased, "but I never get tired of hearing it." So Penelope returned to teaching part-time, and the arrangement worked well for everyone. Thomas thrived under Mrs. Chen's care, and Penelope felt fulfilled in a way that combined all the parts of her life. She was a wife, a mother, and a teacher, and she did not have to choose between them. 2 years later, they had another child, a daughter they named Sarah. She had Ethan's steady temperament and Penelope's curiosity, and Thomas took his role as big brother very seriously. The ranch prospered as well. Ethan's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and he found himself with more business than he could handle. He hired help, 2 young men from town who needed work and learned quickly. The additional income allowed them to expand the house, adding on another bedroom and a larger kitchen. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, illnesses and injuries, and the 100 small crises that came with ranching and raising children. But through it all, Ethan and Penelope faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Penelope back to the creek where they had met. The children were at Mrs. Chen's for the night, giving them a rare evening alone. 10 years, Penelope marveled, looking at the water. "Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like you have always been here." Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Do you ever regret it, staying here marrying me?" "Never." Penelope turned in his arms to face him. "This is the life I was meant to live. You are the man I was meant to love. Everything that happened, everything that brought me here was worth it for this. Even the stagecoach accident, even that, though I would prefer not to repeat it." Penelope smiled up at him. "You carried me home where it was warm, just like you promised. But you gave me so much more than warmth. You gave me love and family and a place where I truly belong. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything," Ethan countered. "I was just existing before you. You taught me how to really live." They kissed by the creek as the sun set. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that was richer than either could have imagined. By 1890, Thomas was 13 and Sarah was 11, both of them growing faster than Ethan could believe. Thomas had inherited his father's way with horses and spent every spare moment in the stables. Sarah had her mother's love of learning and talked constantly about becoming a doctor, a lofty goal but one that Penelope encouraged completely. The ranch had grown to include not just horses but cattle as well, and Ethan employed 5 steady hands plus seasonal workers during busy times. They were prosperous, well-respected in the community, and deeply content. Penelope still taught, though she had moved to teaching just 3 days a week. She had helped shape an entire generation of children in the area, and former students often came back to visit, bringing their own children to meet the teacher who had made such a difference in their lives. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah between them and Thomas tinkering with a bridle he was repairing, Penelope leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "You remember that first night?" she asked quietly. "When you carried me into your house and Mrs. Chen fussed over me and I was so scared and so cold." "I remember everything about that day," Ethan said. "I remember thinking that I was going to die in that creek. I had given up. But then I heard your voice and I looked up and there you were. Like an answer to a prayer I did not know I was praying. I thank God every day that I took that route home," Ethan said, "that I heard you and found you. It was meant to be," Penelope said with certainty. "Everything that happened was leading us to that moment. All the pain and the struggle and the fear, it was all so we could find each other." Thomas looked up from his work. "Is this the story about how you met? You have told us 100 times, and we will tell you 100 more," Ethan said, ruffling his son's hair. "It is a good story." "It is the best story," Sarah declared. "Father saved Mother from the creek." "He did more than that," Penelope said softly. "He saved my life in every way a person can be saved." The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons. Thomas grew into a fine young man, eventually marrying a rancher's daughter from Virginia City, and starting his own spread with help from Ethan. Sarah went east to medical school, an almost unheard of achievement for a woman, but she was determined and brilliant, and Penelope and Ethan supported her completely despite the distance. More grandchildren came, filling the house with noise and joy during holidays and visits. Ethan's hair turned gray, and Penelope's face gained lines, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been that day by the creek. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, and they mourned her deeply. She had been part of their family for so long, had helped them through so much. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down to Thomas, when Ethan and Penelope decided they were ready to slow down. They built a smaller house on the property, close enough to help when needed but far enough to give everyone space. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, Ethan stood and raised his glass. "50 years ago," he said, his voice still strong despite his age, "I found this woman crying in a frozen creek. I told her I would carry her home where it was warm, and I did. But what I did not know then was that she would carry me too, through every joy and every sorrow, every triumph and every failure. Penelope, you have been my partner, my love, my best friend. You have made my life richer than I ever dreamed it could be. Here is to 50 more years." "I will hold you to that," Penelope said, her eyes bright with tears and laughter. They kissed to applause and cheers, and later when the party had wound down and they were alone in their small house, Penelope took Ethan's hand. "You know what I think about sometimes?" she asked. "Tell me." "I think about that woman who was so cold and scared, who had run away from everything she knew. I think about how lost she felt, how uncertain. And then I think about this woman, the one I became, who has lived such a full and beautiful life. They are the same person, but also completely different." "You were always this woman," Ethan said. "You just needed the space to become her. And you gave me that space, along with your love and your support and your home." Penelope smiled at him. "I carried you home where it is warm," you said, "but Ethan, you are my home. Wherever you are, that is where I am warm. And wherever you are is where I am whole," Ethan replied. They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that was extraordinary in its ordinary beauties. They had faced challenges and overcome them. They had raised children who were good and kind. They had loved each other through everything life threw at them. As the night deepened and the stars came out, the same stars they had kissed under so many years ago, Ethan held Penelope close and thought about the improbable miracle of that day by the creek. If he had taken a different route, if he had been 5 minutes earlier or later, if he had not heard her crying, so many small chances that had led to this big life. "What are you thinking about?" Penelope asked. "About how lucky I am. About how a random moment can change everything. About how I found you and you found me, and we have been finding each other every day since." "That is beautiful," Penelope murmured, nestling closer. "You have become quite the poet in your old age. You bring it out in me." They stayed like that for a long time, two people who had weathered storms and celebrated joys, who had built something lasting and true. The creek where they met still flowed, running strong through the property, a constant reminder of where their story began. But it was not where their story ended, because their story lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch that Thomas maintained, in the patients that Sarah treated, in the countless students that Penelope had taught over the years. Their love had created ripples that spread far beyond themselves, touching lives in ways they would never fully know. As they finally headed to bed, walking slowly with the careful steps of people who had earned their age, Ethan paused at the window to look out over the land. His land. Their land. The place where he had built a life worth living. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Penelope asked. "For saying yes. For staying. For loving me. For everything." Penelope came to stand beside him, taking his hand. "Thank you for finding me, for carrying me home. For showing me what love really means." They stood together in the darkness, hands joined, hearts beating in familiar rhythm. Outside, the Nevada night spread vast and beautiful, full of stars and silence and the promise of tomorrow. The creek ran on, cold and clear, but inside their home there was only warmth, the warmth of a love that had endured for 50 years and would endure until the end. Ethan had promised to carry Penelope home where it was warm, and he had kept that promise every single day of their marriage. Not just in that first desperate rescue, but in the 1,000 small ways he showed his love, the daily choosing of her and their life together. And Penelope had carried him too, had given him purpose and joy, and a reason to look forward to each new day. Together they had created something beautiful and lasting, a partnership built on mutual respect and unwavering devotion. As they climbed into bed, still holding hands the way they had on their wedding night and every night since, Ethan felt the same sense of peace and rightness he always felt beside her. This was where he belonged. This was home. "I love you," Penelope whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," Ethan replied. "Always and forever." They drifted off to sleep, two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of ways and created a life that was extraordinary precisely because it was filled with ordinary moments of love and connection. The cowboy who had found her crying in the frozen creek, and the woman he had carried home where it was warm, had built something that transcended that single moment of rescue. They had built a lifetime of warmth together, a refuge from every storm, a love that had started with a promise kept and grown into something neither of them could have imagined. And as they slept, hands still intertwined, The stars kept their eternal watch, bearing witness to a love story that had begun in cold water and fear, but bloomed into warmth and joy and a happiness that lasted all their days. Their story, which had started with such drama and near tragedy, ended in the sweetest way possible, with two people who loved each other deeply, surrounded by family, content in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved better, and that their legacy would continue long after they were gone, in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched.